Now let's get back to building out this Twitter clone. For the majority of the rest of this build, we're going to be using a service called Firebase. Firebase is built by Google as well, so Flutter and Firebase, they kind of go really well together. And Firebase provides a lot of cloud services. Some of those are authentication, database, and even storage. We're going to actually use all three in the rest of this build. Specifically for authentication, we're going to check that the user is authenticated. We're going to just use email and password to have them sign up and then also be able to log in. But you can authenticate with many other ways in Firebase that you'll see in the next lesson. We're also going to be using the database a lot, specifically for storing user information, for example, their name and their profile picture. And we're also going to be storing all the tweets in here. And lastly, we use a storage solution. So this is for bigger files. Specifically, we're going to be storing the profile picture in the storage. And then we're going to link to the location in storage within our database. So to use Firebase, first thing we need to do is install it. If you go to firebase.google.com, they actually give you a whole guide to installing Firebase on your Flutter application. So this will be linked below the lesson. Now, Firebase is also a package, so you can do the old school way of installing the package and making sure everything's configured. But Firebase actually provides us a really neat tool to do this for us. So first, we need to have the Firebase CLI installed. Now to do that, we go on macOS. We want to run this command in our terminal. So I'm going to go to the terminal, paste that in, and enter my password for the Mac. For me, it's actually already installed, so it says I'm good to go. But if it wasn't installed, it should be installed now. Now we can go back to the actual Firebase implementation. So next we want to log into Firebase using our terminal. I type in logged in, and it's already logged in with my email. Then we want to activate the Flutter Fire CLI. So this is the one that's specifically dedicated for Flutter. Okay, Flutter Fire should be installed now. Now we want to configure it for our specific project. So make sure you're in the folder for your project. I am here. I'll be able to paste it in. It says Flutter Fire command not found. Okay, so it didn't work the first time, but I finally got it working. Let me show you how I got that working, just in case you run into a similar problem. So by adding this line to your shell's config file, we'll do that by going into the terminal. Now we're going to do something similar to when we first installed Flutter. So we need to lsla, which shows all the folders. And depending whether you're using a bash terminal or a ZSH terminal, here I'm using ZSH, so I'm going to need this specific file right here. We want to do vim.zshrc or bash rc if you're using that. And then in order to edit, you want to click I. And then I already pasted that in, but you can paste it in again. I'm going to remove that because I don't want to paste it in twice, but paste it in here so that your path is here. Then escape, and then colon, W, and Q. You can see that down here. So type that out, which means it will write and then quit. And then you should be able to close it, close and restart VS Code so this terminal is new. Then type in Flutterfire configure, and it should work. So now we can select a project. While I was building out the demos, I had a Twitter clone, but we're going to create a completely new project here. We're going to call it Official Twitter. Not letting me type more. Maybe we'll just leave it to Official Twitter. There we go. We're creating a new Firebase project called Official Twitter. So it asks us which platforms we want to support. We're just going to do all of them for now. There's specific files on Android side that need to be updated when you're doing this. So we want to click yes. And there we go. Our Firebase project should be created. And our app now has a Firebase options file here. This is the thing that actually connects us to Firebase and gives us all the keys and all of that stuff that you need. It also added in a Google Services.json file in the Android and also in the iOS folder. So this command, the CLI that with Flutterfire, does basically everything you need in order to use Firebase within your applications. So see, we have some promise here, because in order to use Firebase, we need to add a package called Firebase Core. So to do that, you can go to the add dependency command on VS Code and do Firebase core. Now if we add that in, it gets the packages for us, the error goes away, and we should be good to go now. Now, how do we know that this actually worked? Well, we can go to the console. That's console.firebase.com. And if you go to all your Firebase projects, I should see an official Twitter one right here. Our Android app is connected, our iOS app is connected, so we are ready to go. We're going to deal with authentication and Cloud Firestore in the next videos, but for now, let's just make sure everything is connected with our app and working. Now, I first want to start up with cleaning up this main file. I usually like my main file to be very simple and just have all the setup parts. I don't want the home page to be part of this main file. So first, I'm going to do Command D to select all the My Homepage widgets. And this actually isn't a home page, it's a sign-in widget. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to cut this out, create a new file. I'm going to call it signin.dart. Paste that in here, bring in material. You'll still see some errors, like the sign up screen. We need to make sure that is imported. If we go back to main, make sure our sign in screen is imported. And we can actually set up a folder here to clean it up some more called pages. We can move the sign in into there and the sign up. Okay, now our code is a little bit more cleaned up. We can get to actually initializing Firebase within our application. So to do that, we can keep going through the documentation of how to add Firebase to your Flutter app. So did the Firebase core, we did the configure. Want to add these packages at the top of our main.dart file. So add those in, and then we want to set up the configuration to initialize our Firebase application right at the very top. And it is a asynchronous event, so we want to change this to be asynchronous, and we want to wait until it's initialized before we actually run that app. So now if we try to run this application and it runs successfully, we will know that it was initialized properly and Firebase is connected to our app. So we get this problem that our CocoaPods is a little out of date and we need to update it. So CocoaPods is the one that manages the packages for the iOS specific side of things. I want to run this pod repo update to update all those packages within the iOS section. So we want to go into the iOS folder and run pod repo update. Okay, looks like it ran successfully. If we do a pod install, it should install all the dependencies we need for Firebase on the iOS side. Okay, looks like it worked. And if we run it again, it looks like the packages are updated. And by the way, that might not happen too. I just thought I would include it just in case. But we actually have a problem. So it says the binding has not yet initialized. So what's happening here is that in our main function, we made this asynchronous. Now what that means is some of the setup part of Flutter isn't there yet when we start trying to initialize this Firebase. So I want to make sure all the core parts of Flutter are ready and working before we do this initialization. Now, like it says, we can fix that by having this Flutter widgets binding ensure those bindings are initialized before we do anything. And now we should hopefully be able to rerun it. And there we go, our application is running and started up with no errors. So that means Firebase is connected to our application. We're ready to move on to the next step, which is actually making this form do something.